So, what happens when two of history's greatest poets, who also happen to be best friends and collaborators, have a huge, fundamental disagreement about the very nature of their art? Well, you get one of the most fascinating debates in all of literature. We're talking about William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and a friendly argument that would simmer for almost 20 years, forcing Coleridge to define with incredible precision the difference between a poem and poetry itself. It all started here, with this incredible shared mission statement. This was the revolutionary idea behind their 1798 collection, Lyrical Ballads. They wanted to do something totally new, fuse two things that seemed like total opposites. On one hand, you have the real, observable world, the truth of nature, and on the other, the magical, transforming power of the human imagination. This was a project that was literally going to change literature forever.
Now, to really get the debate, you first have to understand the alliance. So picture this, it's 1797. Coleridge and Wordsworth are neighbors out in the English countryside of Somersetshire. They're spending their days walking and talking and just dreaming up a completely new kind of poetry, one that would pretty much kickstart the entire British Romantic movement.
And they divided their labor perfectly. It was genius, really. Wordsworth's job was to take ordinary, everyday things and make them feel brand new again, to wake our minds up from what he called the lethargy of custom. You know, that feeling when you stop really seeing the world around you? Meanwhile, Coleridge took on the flip side. He would write about the supernatural, but make it feel so emotionally real that we, the readers, would gladly go along for the ride. It's that famous phrase, a willing suspension of disbelief. They were truly two sides of the same revolutionary coin. Their collaboration was a massive success. But then, just a few years later, a single document would plant the seeds of a major intellectual divide. And this is where we get to the heart of the conflict, Wordsworth's famous preface. Just look at how this all played out over time. In 1798, the first edition comes out. It's a joint effort, simple enough. But in 1800, for the second edition, Wordsworth on his own adds this long preface laying out his personal theory of poetry. And then it takes Coleridge 17 years, a whole 17 years, to finally publish his formal, detailed response in his critical masterpiece, Biographia literaria. For all that time, this disagreement was just brewing between them. So what was the big deal? What was the problem? Well, it all came down to this one phrase. In his preface, Wordsworth argued that the best poetry should use the language of real life, the simple, direct language of everyday people. Now, Coleridge totally agreed this was perfect for Wordsworth poems, for his side of the project, but he strongly objected to the idea that this should be a rule for all poetry. For him, it just completely upset the delicate balance of their original vision. But here's the thing about Coleridge. In order to properly argue his point, he knew he couldn't just say, well, I disagree. No. Being a deep philosophical thinker, he had to go all the way back to first principles. He had to meticulously define his terms, starting with the most basic, most fundamental question of all.
He basically asks, hold on, before we can even talk about what makes poetry good or bad, what even is a poem? What separates a poem from, say, a novel or a history book? And this is where his argument gets incredibly sharp and precise.
And this is the definition he landed on. A poem, for Coleridge, is a very specific kind of composition. First, its immediate goal is pleasure, not just spitting out facts or truth like a science textbook. But second, and this is really the key, a poem is defined by the harmonious relationship between the whole thing and every single one of its individual parts. Every word, every comma, every rhythm, it all has to work together and contribute to the total effect. Nothing is wasted. I love this analogy. He says, reading a real poem is like watching a snake move. It's not just a straight line from start to finish. You move forward, but then you pause, you kind of look back at the line you just read, and the power of that previous line is what propels you to the next one. It's this beautiful, recursive movement. It's not about rushing to the end to get the meaning. The journey is the point. Okay, so after defining the poem as this carefully constructed object, Coleridge then moves on to his next, much bigger point. He's about to make a huge distinction between the physical form of a poem and the living, breathing essence that actually animates it. And this right here is the heart of his entire argument against his friend Wordsworth. If a poem is a specific, metrical composition, what then is the spirit, the force, the thing we call poetry? And here's his breathtaking answer. For Coleridge, poetry isn't a text at all. It's a fundamental human power. It's the synthetic and magical power of imagination. It's this incredible force that brings our entire being, our intellect, our emotions, our spirit, into full activity. And most importantly, it can exist anywhere. It can be in philosophy and religious texts, in great works of prose, anywhere the imagination is hard at work, fusing opposing ideas into something new and whole.
So what does this reconciling power actually do? Well, think of it like a kind of magic. It harmonizes opposites. It can take a huge, universal idea and fuse it with one single concrete image. It can take a familiar, everyday object and make it feel completely new and strange. It can take a powerful, chaotic emotion and give it a sense of order and clarity. That is the work of poetry. This table really helps make the distinction super clear. On one side, you have a poem. It's a form, a type of composition. Its main goal is pleasure, and it usually uses meter. On the other side, you have poetry. That's a human power, the soul of genius itself. Its object can absolutely be truth, and it can exist anywhere, even without rhyme or meter. And check out that last point. Coleridge says that not every part of a long poem can or even should be pure poetry. It needs moments to breathe.
Okay, so a 200-year-old literary argument between two friends. Why should we care about this today? Well, because this distinction that Coleridge fought so hard to make gets right to the very heart of what art and creativity are all about. If you remember one thing, make it this powerful analogy. Coleridge separates the vessel from the spirit. You've got the craft, the form, the technique. That's the poem. That's the vessel. But then you have the spark, the insight, the imaginative energy that you pour into it. That is poetry. That's the spirit. And while you definitely need a well-made vessel, it's the spirit that truly matters. And that spirit can be found anywhere.
At the end of the day, Coleridge completely agreed with Wordsworth on the highest goal of their art, to wake us all up from the sleepwalking of daily life. So this leaves us with a great question to think about. Where in your own life, maybe in a song, a film, a book, or even just a conversation, do you see that imaginative, poetic power at work? Where do you see it making you look at the world in a completely new way?